Hello and welcome to the BRR Legal Brief, where we of course bring you the latest legal issues affecting businesses in Australia. Yesterday of course was International Women's Day, and so today we're looking at the Equal Opportunity for Women in the Workplace Act and what it means for corporates. Joining me to discuss the bill and some of the changes is Pattie Walsh, who heads up the Asia Pacific Employment Practice at DLA Piper. Pattie, welcome.
Pleased to be here.
Now, Pattie, this bill has at its heart an aim of increasing women's participation in the workplace and also increasing equality. What are some of the changes that are being introduced?
Yeah, it's a timely piece of legislation, and I think it accords very much with the fact that diversity, in particular gender diversity, is very high on the global agenda beyond Asia and Asia Pac and Australia. So it's very much in keeping with the developments that are emerging internationally. But I think its aim really is to move from the concept of statements about gender equality towards actually making tangible moves towards achieving gender equality. And I think the other point to say is it reflects an evolution from the concept that we're just talking about women and women's equality in the workplace. We're now, and we're relabeling it from women's equal opportunity in the workplace to basically gender and gender equality. So this applies to guys as well, which is also much more contemporary in the thinking. And I think you can, in just the three key messages I think from the legislation are: one, to make the moves towards gender equality real rather than a smokescreen, to cut red tape, and also to have more public accountability.
Well, companies are going to be required to report against a number of equality indicators. What are some of the main ones that are being introduced?
Yeah, I mean, they're the fairly obvious indicators that you get with a piece of equality legislation. So the main focus, or part of the focus, is going to be on statistics. What's the composition of your workforce? And that's pretty usual. But there's also a movement to start looking not just at the workforce generally, but also at the composition of the workforce at the higher echelons. And we all know the debates that are going on about representation and diversity at board level and at those key management structures. So it's beyond just pure diversity. And there's also going to be an obligation to focus on equal pay, REM. And this is the area where, you know, some opponents of the legislation will probably be highlighting the increased focus on equal pay, and will that create more litigation, etc. But that's a key component, very topical. And I guess the other main component is on the practices and the flexible working, etc., that the employer is adopting.
Well, you've mentioned that the Act is looking at gender more broadly. What about in industry, say, which may be more male-dominated or female-dominated? Will there be quotas that need to be filled by companies to balance the gender equality in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the legislation provides the opportunity for the minister to do exactly that, to look at particular sectors, industries, and start putting in place targets and basically really achievable, a really achievable approach and measurable approach to equality. So I think we're almost certainly going to see an evolution towards specific targeting of sectors and industries.
Okay, and companies are always interested in compliance. How difficult will it be, and what are some of the risks or penalties that will apply for non-compliance? Yeah,
I mean, a key element of the legislation and the way that it's being sold and marketed is that it will cut red tape. So that there will be less onus on business, but more deliverables. But of course, hand in hand with more deliverables is if you don't deliver, there has to be some form of sanction. For me, it's a name and shame. The publication of the non-compliance with the elements of the legislation in Parliament publicly. Also, if you bear in mind there's going to be consultation under the legislation, debate with the employees and shareholders. So a real publication of non-compliance. And I think the culture that's trying to be driven through the legislation is putting responsibility up so that it now goes to the CEO to be responsible for the delivery of these targets, etc. And of course there'll be some practical consequences if you're dealing in government work and not being able to get procurement. But the other broader aspect, non-compliance with any legislation will not assist in if an individual brings a discrimination claim. So the use of breaches of this legislation to allege, you know, a discriminatory workplace, etc., is also pretty key. So I think you've got the specifics and the broader implications.
Well, the bill was only introduced last week, but when are the obligations meant to apply?
We've still got to get royal assent.
Yeah.
And the timetable on that is never entirely clear, but it looks as though that's going to be driven through aggressively. It looks as though it's going to be 1st of April or when of this year or when royal assent comes. What is clear in the timetable is that within 2 years, April 2014, we will have the clear identifiable targets put in place. So I think there's going to be a staging of some of the obligations, but this is a piece of legislation that's being driven through aggressively and seriously. So from you know, all business perspectives, it's something they've got to get to grips with pretty quickly.
Some good advice there from Pattie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
And viewers, thank you also for joining us. We hope that you can join us next week for the live legal brief.